Yes, it's time for the Tech Talk show this afternoon. And in today's episode of the Tech Talk Wednesday, we will be learning about 10 tips that can help us get the more out of Microsoft Azure. And we're going to be learning all of this today from Thomas Maurer. Hi, Thomas.
Hi, Kasim. It's a pleasure to be on this show. Love to speak to you, and hopefully, I can show and talk about a couple of new things and make people's life easier by knowing a little bit more about Azure.
Yes, very well. First, let's meet you, Thomas. Who is Thomas? So let's start with that.
Yeah, so again, I want to say first, thank you for having me. It's a real honor to be on the show. My name is Thomas Maurer. I work as a cloud advocate at Microsoft. I'm now working for Microsoft for 1.5 years. And before that, I was already doing a lot of Microsoft projects. I worked as a consultant for virtualization, Hyper-V, but then also Azure projects as well. And now I'm basically part of the Azure engineering team. And as a cloud advocate, we always get asked, what does a cloud advocate do, right? So we are basically if we look very high level on what we do, there are like two main things. And one of the things is like creating and delivering content, meaning that we write articles, we write blog posts, we create videos, we do presentations. We are trying to help people with being successful with Azure or other Microsoft solutions. And the other big part is about feedback, right? We want to know and learn from our customers and communities, what is working for them, what is not working for them, so we can actually go and improve things. So that is very high level what we do.
All right, Thomas. So next, I know everyone will be really interested and want to know how they can get the most out of Azure and perhaps their Azure subscription now. But first, can you help us understand why you think today's topic is important?
Oh yeah, so that is a fantastic question. I was like, when you came up with that topic, I was like, oh, that's perfect. That is really good. The thing is, like, there's a lot of things happening in Azure, right? And there's a lot of different tools and things which make using Azure or learning about Azure easier. However, not a lot of people know about all of that, right? Because there's so much going on. It's really like such a large field, as you know, right? There's so many different services, so many different pages. So I'm always happy when I can talk about this and show some of the stuff which help. Like, I realize when I use Azure, like, oh, this helps also. Like, this is interesting to know, right? Just last week, I learned a new trick, which we will talk a little bit about later on it. But there's so many cool things. So that is like, I found this is really important. Again, I mean, those tips, some of probably of our viewers and listeners, they already know about some of the stuff, right? It's not, maybe it's not all new, but I always find stuff which is new. So really happy to talk about that.
Okay, and I'm sure we can't get a better person than you yourself to walk us through this today. So now, Thomas, let's delve into the meat of today's topic. So what are those 10 tips that you would like to walk us through today that would help us make the most of our Azure, Thomas? So, and I believe you're going to be walking us through 10 of these tips, right?
Yeah, I hope I can make it through all 10 because it's like it is so much. It's and I love to talk. As you know, I love to talk about these things, right? So I hope we can make it through this.
Yeah, okay. And remember, Thomas, we've got 30 minutes to do this, so let's be mindful. Okay, so it's over to you now, Thomas.
Okay, awesome. So the first thing I want to talk about, I think that is something good to understand, is Azure Cloud Shell, right? when we work with Azure, usually we often work with the portal, or we can also use the CLI or PowerShell to actually do some command line stuff with Azure, right? We can install that on our machines and download it and do all of that. But then it always takes a lot of time to like set up your machine and then like also have the right tools installed and then make sure that they're always up to date. So the Azure team thought that it would be great to have a tool called Azure Cloud Shell, which is basically a console you can open up in Azure. And I will, for the ones who can actually see, I will share it on my screen here. But however, for those who are just listening to us, so if you open up the Azure portal, on the top, you will have an icon for Cloud Shell. And when you open that one, a new window will come up, and here you can actually see that I get a command line experience within the Azure portal, and I can choose if that should be PowerShell or if that should be the CLI. And then if I type different commands here, you can see here, for example, I have the Azure commands from the Azure CLI, so I can go and run some scripts here, for example, or commands. Instead of installing that on my machine, I can simply open that up, and I don't need to install anything on my machine. So I can use that on my computer. I can even use that on my phone. I can use it on my tablet. Wherever I have access to a browser, I can basically then go and run these commands. So that is I personally think really powerful.
Okay.
So then going forward, what I also always help, like, I mean, I know that a lot of people, they want to try out Azure, and then they usually go out and say, hey, I don't want to spend a lot of money. I just want to try it out, right? So what people don't know, and I'm loading that here, is there is a possibility to create a free Azure account. And people then will go and get 12 months of free Azure services. So you can go out and deploy certain things and try out a couple of things to actually build your application or learn about Azure especially. And you can see here, you get 12 months of popular, like some of the popular services for free. You get also $200 in credit for 30 days to do like some advanced stuff. Like you get that just for free to play with it. And then we also have over 25 services which are always free, right? Which you can always use to play around with Azure. And you can find more if you go to the website. So it's just azure.com/free. And there you can actually find out what you can get. You can see here we have things about AI, databases, storage, even virtual machines, and so on. So this is really, really interesting if you want to try out Azure and you don't want to spend a lot of money on it. You can go and create your free account here, right? Good, but there is more, obviously. So we talked a lot. There are students, right? And a lot of people want to learn more about Azure. And so even though with that free account, often it's like, where do I start, right? And not everyone can go into get a course or anything. So what I highly recommend, and I think if you in this talk, if you only keep one thing in mind, I think that would be my thing I want to talk about, is a Microsoft Learn, right?
Microsoft Learn, yes.
Exactly. So this is a website which is not that new, but still a lot of people don't know about it. It's Microsoft.com/learn. And I'm sure you already tried it out, right? I'm sure you.
Yes, of course, yes.
And it's actually a free learning source for not just for Azure, but for also other Microsoft technologies. And you can go and you can basically read a little bit about it. We have things called learning paths and modules, right? So these are, I will also show that on the screen, but what you actually do is you basically can go in and say, hey, I'm a Azure developer, or I'm a Azure administrator, I'm a data engineer, or whatever you are, or whatever you want to become. That's also very important. It's not just necessarily what you are, it's what you want to learn about. So you can select this, and then the website, you can also tell, hey, I'm a beginner, I'm already advanced, I already worked with it. And then you can say which technologies, for example, you're using, and you can actually go out and browse these things. Oh, so I was a little bit too fast here. Let me do this. And you get different learning paths. So maybe you can sign in here. So you get different learning paths. So if I go to that, you can see here, we have right now 1,763 different modules you can complete. And those are going from like, how do I create an Azure account, to like, how do I create a virtual machine? How do I use databases in Azure, and so on, where you can click through. And I want to show something really interesting. It's how it actually looks like. So if I look, for example, a training or a module to create virtual machines, I can then select that, and I will get some text explaining what it is about, right? So I will find out, hey, what is the plan of that learning module? You can read. It will explain what is a virtual machine, what is Linux on Azure, how do I create that, and you get like all the information on the screen, very well explained, so you can go step by step. But even more interesting, though, is if you want to try it out and you don't have an Azure account, you don't also want to create a free Azure account, you can also use something called sandboxes. Now, sandboxes really allow you to have a free Azure subscription, if you will, and you can read through this learning module. And then you have, for example, commands here, which you need to run, and you can run them side by side, right? So you can go out without even having an Azure account. You can go out and play around, right? So there are also ones where you have videos explaining how you do things, and much, much more, right? So that is definitely something people should I really recommend, Microsoft.com/learn. This is a really great place. We also have teachers, for example, who work with their students, and they go together through Microsoft Learn as well. So there's really a big opportunity for everyone to try things out there. Good. We also have much, much more. Again, there's a huge list. But if you're already working with Azure, right? I always get questions. How do I, like, I'm already in the Azure portal. I have my Azure account. How do I set something up, right? And so I could either go to the documentation pages and read about it. They're really good, and you can actually find like the documentation, how to set things up. But if you're in the Azure portal and you don't want to really leave that, there's also something called let me put that away, called the Quick Start Center. So if you go to the Quick Start Center, you can have different getting started guides. So for example, how to create a web app, right? Or how to set up a database. And you can click on start, and you will directly within the portal be able to learn more about it. And then it explains to you how you actually create, for example, now in this example, a web app, what you need to take care of, what you can do, and it will directly bring you to the right wizard to create these. What is also very great about the Quick Start Center is that there's not just like, how do I deploy something or whatever. There's also some setup guides. So if you, for example, want to set up Azure, we have the Azure setup guide, which then gives you a guide to basically do the base setup of your organization, gives you some documentation. We also have a migration guide. So if you want to do migrations, you can actually go out and do migrations as well. So it explains to you how do you move a workload or an application to Azure. And again, there's much more. But the Quick Start Center is a really good place if you are in the Azure portal where you can go there.
Okay.
Going forward is also like, so this is then a little bit, now we talked a little bit about how to get started, right? And how I get things done. I want to go a little bit further and saying, hey, we already have things in Azure, but we want to make sure that we do this the right way. So I recommend two different things. So first of all, there is the Azure Advisor, which is also like you can find that in the Azure portal, and on the top in the Azure portal you have that search field, and I usually always use this to navigate to the right place. So if you type Advisor there, this is basically a helpful assistant, if you will, who looks at your Azure environment and then can help you with different recommendations. It's not just like general stuff, right? It's not just this is what you need to look out for. It really looks on what you have in Azure, and then it will tell you what you can optimize. So on this can be on different scenarios. So for example, one of them is for example, costs. So it will tell you how you can save money on Azure, right? So if, for example, one simple example is if I deploy a virtual machine and Azure Advisor realizes that there is the virtual machine does not really need to be that big, it will recommend to you that you change it to a smaller size virtual machine, and so you pay less money on that virtual machine, which again can be super helpful. But then we also have security recommendations to make sure that you're secure, and I will talk a little bit about that in a bit. But it will also help you to do like reliability considerations. So if you have an application which is really important and should be available, like even if something breaks, then we also have recommendations for that. And then in my case, for example, you can see here, for those who are watching the video, they can see that I have 4 recommendations here, and it tells me, hey, to protect, for example, your virtual machines, you can enable backup. So they're backed up, and they're like, if I delete something, I can just restore it. And it will tell me which virtual machines I haven't backed up, right? So if I have virtual machine, if I miss something, like I usually back up all of my virtual machines, but I forgot to do it for one, Azure Advisor will remind me and tell me, hey, this virtual machine should also be backed up, right? So I really love that one as well. And again, there is much more. Also, as you can see here in the portal, it's cost, security, reliability, operations, performance, and all of that. And you can even set up alerts. So instead of just always going to Azure Advisor, you can set up an alert, which will then send you, for example, an email and tell you, hey, you should back up that specific virtual machine. We saw that you created a new virtual machine, but it's not backed up yet. So you can do that, right? What I really find interesting is, though, the security part. So we have, let me find the security. We have a service called Azure Security Center. Now, what is really, like, I'm sure you discussed that before, like cloud security is really like it can be different than you did security in the past, right? Yes. It's not that you have this castle anymore where you have protection around it and everything in the castle is not protected anymore. You really need to have that zero trust methodology or concept where you say, hey, everything should be secure. Now, what we found out is that a lot of people, like, there's so many things you need to think of, right? And a lot of people just like it's impossible to keep track of everything, especially if you create virtual machines, then you delete them again, you create a new one, and so on. So we have Security Center, which you can go to, and there's also a free tier available. So it starts as free, but you can have some advanced functionality if you wanted to. And to make it easy to actually see what's going on, we have something called the Secure Score. Sorry. And there you can see, like for example, in my case, I can then see I'm only 60% secure. There is a big potential of what I can do better. So what I want to go and check out is the recommendations. So this will then tell me, hey, these are the things, for example, here, you need to look out for, right? So it will tell me, hey, you should encrypt certain things that they're encrypted. You should probably enable endpoint protection and so on. Now, again, this is a great list, but you can see in my case, the list is huge, right? It's really big. So where do I start? So I go to the one which has the highest points, because we say basically this is probably the one which has the highest impact. So I always go out and go in my environment, and then I go and check out the recommendation for my environment, and then I see how I can fix it, right? And for some of them, we have just documentation on how to fix it and making sure that it's secure. For others, we have a button called like quick fix, which then just goes out and fixes it for you and make sure that you, for example, installed the vulnerability assessment tool to make sure that your virtual machines and your databases and so on are secure. So that is another one I really, really much like, is the Azure Security Center. So we still have some time, right? I have like a couple of things which I have left.
Perhaps maybe one or two more if time permits.
Yep. So I will go to one specific I wanted to mention, and that is one called the Cloud Adoption Framework. This is something which is more or less a documentation of how to set up your Azure environment. Right. So this is it's a documentation with implementation guidance and best practices, how to set up your Azure environment. And so if you are implementing Azure for a company, you can basically go out and like there are many things you need to think of, right? And we discussed already, there are like documentation and so on, but those are very focused very much on like, how do I do something technical? But as we know, there is much more involved. And so we have these key points here, like strategy, plan, get ready, migrate, innovate, govern, manage, and organize, and much more. Those are some of the key pillars when you do Azure in an Azure project for a company. And these will help you to first understand what you want to do, then plan what you want to do, and then getting your Azure environment ready to be that you can actually move workloads to your Azure environment. And then obviously we have things where you say how to move them, how to migrate them, how to make them better, and so on. But again, what I want to quickly highlight, I think this is really the thing I want to talk about, because this is like a very difficult part for many of our customers, is how do I get my Azure environment ready? And so we have something called the Azure landing zones. These are, again, part of the Cloud Adoption Framework. So if you use the search engine and you look for Azure Cloud Adoption Framework, you will find the information for that. And there it is explained that we have certain landing zones, for example, and we will have documentation on how to set this up. This will focus on, for example, security, governance, networking, identity, and all that, right? So it will tell you, it will tell the people, how do I set up my Azure environment? So I think those are some of the key key things I want to show off to people who I think are very important, but not everyone knows about.
Yes. Thank you so much, Thomas, for sharing these very insightful tools with us. But tell us, Thomas, quickly, from all of these tools that you've shared with us now, which one would you put on your number one list and why?
Oh, that is super difficult. They are all very important. It really depends a little bit on what your stage is, right? If you are right now a consultant implementing Azure, I think the most important one for you is to know the cloud adoption framework, right? To go out and learn about that. If you are a engineer or a student and also just a professional as well, if you're like going that direction or you also want to get Azure certified, then I think Microsoft Learn is very important. This is really a good place where you then can go out and learn about these different technologies. And then it's always good to have like teachers like you explaining things as well, right? To have that addition together, because that then really helps to understand. If you are an Azure engineer and you already know how to work with Azure and you want to make your life easier, I think Azure Cloud Shell is very, very cool. That is where I basically, when I run a Azure PowerShell script or CLI, I don't install that on my machine anymore. Well, I have it on my machine, but usually I use the Cloud Shell because then I know I have everything installed I ever need. And I can run it from everywhere, right? I can run it on my phone. I can run it on my PC. I can run it on my tablet.
Yes. Thank you very much once again. But I see you've shared something for the students, for those that are newbies, for those that are just still learning Azure, and for the pros as well. So that's really very great. But let's see if there's any question from anyone. Will anyone on the call like to ask Thomas a question? So is there one of you who can have time to squeeze one question in? Okay, so it seemed like there are no questions, on today's show. But is there any last words from you, Thomas?
So yeah, I want to say thank you for everyone who is watching and listening to this show. I really appreciate again to be part of that. I really love what you do. I saw the video or the recording with Stevie Buchanan last week. So I'm super happy about that. Again, I thank you everyone who is listening. I hope you enjoy what I had to show and tell today. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to connect with me. Feel free to reach out. Happy to talk about different things and see how we can make Azure better so everyone can use it and take advantage of it. So that is basically, again, just a big thank you to everyone.
Okay. So a very big thank you again to you, Thomas Maurer, for doing this, for spending time with us today to share your knowledge. And thank you everyone for listening. So I hope that we've taken one lesson or two from what Thomas has to share with us today. So on that note then, so it's a wrap. So this is where we draw the curtain on today's episode of the show. So it's bye-bye from me now and Thomas. Thank you so much, everyone. And